So Bellator 287 is coming up this weekend, and the We Want Picks team have decided that we're going to be bringing some Bellator and PFL content to the channel, and R2 MMA Analysis, which is me, is going to bring it to you guys. If you are unfamiliar with me, or you're surprised by my presence on the We Want Picks channel, I did Dana White's Contender Series 2022 predictions on the We Want Picks channel, and I think we did pretty good. I think we had a pretty good prediction rate, so hopefully we can carry that over to Bellator 287, and I'm looking forward to this card. It's not the most stacked card in the world, but it is in Italy, which is interesting, you know, because I don't think that the UFC's put on a card in Italy. I think maybe the Bellator is making their debut in Italy as well, and there's 15 fights to talk about. That's a lot of fights, and Bellator, just a little disclaimer, is pretty tough to predict, not really in the fact that the fights are hard to predict, but a lot of the time you get matchups like this. You got a 5-0 guy versus an 8-6 guy, and then a lot of the times you've got like minus 800 favorites on the card. You've got minus 700 favorites on this card. You've got minus 500 favorites on this card. It's kind of hard to pick against that, so just letting you know, to win in Bellator, in my personal opinion and from my experience, you want to get a couple of good parlays together, or try and snipe a good underdog. I feel like that's kind of the way that you should be attacking Bellator, and that's kind of how I'm going to be trying to attack the card, and giving you guys reasons why I think the favourites win, if I think that the odds are correct, or if I think that they're a little bit too wide. So that's kind of what I was planning on doing for this Bellator card. So let's just jump straight into it. That was a pretty long intro. Let's just get into Bellator 287 in Italy, which is going to be interesting. So the first fight on the Tapology card, but in my opinion this won't be the first fight of the night. You've got Oleg Popov making his Bellator debut against Denis Dolce, who is also making his Bellator debut. And the big difference between these two is the age, in my opinion. Both guys are pretty similar in height, they're both pretty similar in size, both of them weighing in between 240 and 250 pounds in their last fights. And Oleg Popov is not even 31 years old yet, and Denis Dolce is 43, well 42, almost 43 years old, and Denis Dolce has not lost a fight since 2009, which is pretty interesting. He last lost in the UFC to Stefan Struve. Before that, he lost to Cain Velasquez. You can't really blame those losses, but since then, you know, he's been going on a pretty good win streak, and he hasn't been fighting the greatest competition, really. He took 5 years off between 2016 and 2021. And yeah, now he's back to fight Oleg Popov, and Oleg Popov is a prospect that, in my opinion, the UFC probably should have looked at signing. You know, he recently beat Bigfoot Silva, which in my opinion is just sad. More than anything, Silva's on a massive losing streak right now. He's been knocked out so many times in his career. It's tough, but he's got a good win over Marcus Brigadow, and he's got a couple of good wins as well on the regional scene. But Marcus Brigadow is actually a pretty good win, because you actually see this guy in a few notable people's losses. You know, this guy has beaten Acacio dos Santos, who recently fought on Dana White's Contender Series, and he's also fought Jamal Pogues, who's in the UFC right now. So, on the Contender Series himself, actually. So yeah, there's a pretty good win for Popov. I think Popov's going to knock out the almost 43-year-old Denis Dolce. The odds minus 600 in a heavyweight fight is a little bit wide, considering the fact that literally anything can happen. But I'm going to be going with Oleg Popov by knockout here. He's just so much younger. He's been fighting the better competition recently as well. And as I said, Denis Dolce is almost 43 years old. I can't really trust that at this point. And everyone's going with Popov. I've got to go with Popov by KO as well. Both guys are finishers. I expect it to be a finish either way, but I think that Popov really should get a Bellator debut win here. And maybe he could go pretty far in the rankings. He's actually a very elite talent. As I said, I think the UFC really should have snatched this guy up, but Bellator's got to win first. And now the second fight of the night, you've got Luke Trainor taking on Lucas Alcina, and the pick here is Luke Trainor. He's a minus 700 favourite, and when I saw those odds, they first come out today, I thought, you know what, I might look into Lucas Alcina as potentially a pretty good underdog that could cash. I know he's almost 37 years old, and you know he hasn't fought the best competition in the world, but I thought maybe if he's looking really good against this level of competition, then he could make something happen. But I took a lot of note in his most recent performance against Juan Carlos Lopez. It's actually a very easy to find fight. You can find it on YouTube and maybe do your own research on this fight if you really wanted to. But Lucas Alcina in that matchup there, he obviously did win the decision, and he did look pretty good. But this Juan Carlos Lopez guy, he was 38 years old, he was a little bit shorter, and he was just a brawler for the most part, man. He didn't really seem to have much of a ground game, and he did have power in the hands, and he was throwing a lot of combinations. And to my concern, he was landing combinations on Lucas Alcina, and I don't want to see that happen when you're fighting someone like Luke Trainor, who does have KO power, who does have KOs in Bellator. You know, he knocked out this 9-5 opponent, Yannick Bahati. He knocked out Alex O'Toole, 4-3 at the time. in Bellator himself. And I just feel like Luke Trainor's going to be able to get a KO over Lucas Alcina. I didn't really like what I saw out of that most recent performance from Alcina. Yeah, Alcina's looking good and getting KOs against other lesser opponents. But I really can see Luke Trainor going out there and getting a KO on this one here. He's 6'6" with an 81-inch reach. Lucas Alcina, he was a lot taller than most of the guys that he was fighting, to his credit. But Trainor's going to be 6'6" compared to a 6'3" fighter here. And I like Trainor in this matchup, and I think he's going to get a KO. Minus 700 odds are a little bit ridiculous in my opinion. They kind of always are in Bellator prelims, as I said in the intro. But Luke Trainor by KO is the pick. I do think he's going to get it done inside the distance with a KO here. So yeah, give me Luke Trainor to win that one there. In the next fight, we've got Stephen Hill taking on Andrea Fusi, and I was potentially once again going to look at the underdog in this matchup here. Andrea Fusi, much more experienced fighter, against better competition as well. Andrea Fusi coming off a loss to an 11-1 opponent, who was 44 years old at the time, and before that he fought Walter Pugliese, a 6-2 opponent, who he actually has defeated in the past when he won by split decision almost 4 years ago. But that's one thing about Fusi. He's fought twice in 3 years, and he's lost both of those fights. He lost to Pugliese in the rematch, and then the 44-year-old Nize, as I just said. Stephen Hill, 5-0, minus 700 favourite. In my opinion, a little bit too wide, but he definitely should win this matchup. He made his debut against an 0-6 opponent 4 years ago, and then he fought a debuting guy, another debuting guy, 3-1 opponent, and a debuting guy. So this guy's actually only ever fought one person with a win on their record, and that is Matthew Finlay, and he looked good in that matchup. I would actually kind of come into this one expecting Stephen Hill to be a striker, because everyone's picking him to win by KO on Tapology. I don't know if they're doing the same level of research as I am, but the first thing Stephen Hill really did in that fight was he took Matthew Finlay down. They were feeling each other up on the feet for a little bit, but nothing really happened. And then all of a sudden, Matthew Finlay got taken down by Stephen Hill. He's working his way up. Stephen Hill's threatening a rear naked choke, and he takes him down again. Wins by ground control, and has some really good ground and pound. And that's how he actually ended up winning the fight. He won the fight in second round KO due to ground and pound. And he's just done that to all of his previous opponents, really, unless he's got a submission on them. But I didn't take too much stock in those wins, because they are debuting guys. And then even these two fights have been 3 years ago. But for Andrea Fusi, I had to look 3 years ago, and I had to watch his fight against Walter Pugliese. And that one there, Walter Pugliese was having success in the clinch. For the most part, the fight was a striking affair. So can't take too much from that one there, considering the fact that Stephen Hill is going to be looking to take him down. But what I did see was Andrea Fusi fight the 44-year-old Peter Nize. Peter Nize shot for one takedown. After a little bit of clinching, he got it. And then as soon as Andrea Fusi was taken down, kind of in the middle of the cage, he had nothing for him. And I think that's going to be pretty important in this one here. I think Stephen Hill should be able to beat Andrea Fusi in this fight as well. And it's also worth noting this is a weird catchweight fight of 181 pounds. Hill's like a middleweight. Fusi, I believe, has fought at welterweight for most of his career. So Hill should be bigger. He's going to be the wrestler and grappler in this situation here. He's definitely going to win the rounds if it goes to decision. I think there's a very likely chance that Hill does make it all the way to decision, wins a decision on ground control, and also a little ground and pound. But I'm actually going to pick for Hill to break the guard on the ground and get a ground and pound KO like he has in the past. Submission is very likely. This guy is the grappler out of the two, so going to be going with Hill by inside the distance. I'm going to go with a Hill inside the distance play, but a decision is likely, because maybe Fusi can survive on the ground with Hill, and we could see Hill win a decision. And in this next one, you got Nicolo Solli taking on Barama Kamara. And I'm seeing a lot of people in the Tapology forum saying that Nicolo Solli could be the underdog of the night, but he's not a big underdog. He's only plus 115, so I feel like maybe the value's not there. And in my opinion, betting on a 3-1 fighter taking on a 5-1 fighter is a little bit scary. You've got two very inexperienced guys, two young guys, and it's just a kind of a tough situation, a tough fight to look at. And in my opinion, I actually don't have a good read on it. I'm going to be open and honest with you guys. I don't really have the best read on this fight, but I think that Barama Kamara has much more power on the feet, and I'm actually going to pick for him to win by knockout. But Solli seems to be a pretty good grappler, and he seems to be maybe the guy that could beat Kamara in that one there. Kamara does have one loss in his record for the most part, which he was having to deal with some grappling, and I think maybe Solli could initiate some sort of situation in there, but Solli on a split draw against Bobby Pallett, and then he lost to George Hardwick recently as well. So good levels of competition for him, but he has been fighting in Bellator for most of his career really. And Barama Kamara made his Bellator debut against Victor Vacheri in a fight which I think he was actually expected to lose, and he knocked him out in the first round, which was pretty impressive. And I like him in the sense that he's 6'4" with a 79-inch reach at 170 pounds, and he is a pretty good striker, and he is quite a young guy, and I think that we're going to see Barama Kamara potentially get a KO in this one here. I'm going to pick him to beat Solli with not a lot of confidence whatsoever. In my opinion, just stay away from this fight, man. Just sit back and enjoy it. Two inexperienced guys, two young guys developing their career. It's just hard to get a good read on either two of them, and I'm just going to be honest about that. So, yeah, going to be going with Kamara by KO, but definitely not something that I'd recommend touching. So I said that it's hard to find good underdogs in Bellator, and I'm going to give you guys one. I'm picking Camille Anish. Sorry, I definitely did not say his name correctly, to beat Costello Van Stennis, and that might come as a massive shock to a lot of people, because I know that Costello Van Stennis is very, very highly rated in Bellator. He beat Fabian Edwards by controversial split decision. It was pretty tough. Potentially he won the first, he definitely won the second round, and then he lost to John Salter. John Salter, I believe, is still at the top of the division, but we're talking about 2 years off. He's taken 2 years off since he beat Fabian Edwards. I'm actually not too sure why he did that, because his name was at an all-time high when he beat Fabian Edwards, because that was a bit of a grudge match. They didn't like each other. And before that, you know, he has been beating really good guys, but we're talking about 4 years ago, and I feel like Camille Onišić is going to come out here and he's gonna hurt Costello. He's fighting at 185, he's fought at 175 in the past, but I watched his 185 fight against Vladimir Fedin, and he does not look small for 185 whatsoever, and that was 10 months ago, so he's had time to build up his frame. He's 6'3", he looked big against Vladimir, and yeah, and that was his first fight at 185 pounds, I believe, and I like this guy. He's got really good kicks, and he's got really good technical striking, and he's got KO power. He has lost in the past against a grappler, but even then against Vladimir Fedin, he was in the clinch with him, and he was deciding to clinch with him, and he initiated the clinch exchanges. He did knee him in the balls, which is why they ended up getting in striking range, and then Camille kind of just knocked him out with some crazy good kicks, which is awesome. So I like Camille in this matchup, man. I think that He's gonna look like he's gonna look to try and knock out Costello Van Stennis, and Costello Van Stennis, in my opinion, in this fight is actually gonna try and get a takedown or two. I think he's gonna be trying to grapple with Camille, and if the fight can stay on the feet, I think it's gonna be in Camille's area, and I think that Camille is actually gonna be able to get a knockout in this one. So yeah, give me Camille as an underdog plus 200 right now, which I think is pretty good value for him. So I'm going to be picking him by KO over Costello, who I know is a very highly rated Bellator fighter, don't get me wrong, but he hasn't fought for 2 years. I don't know what he's been doing in those 2 years off, and yeah, I think Camille's a really good signing for Bellator. Honestly, he's probably someone that the UFC might have should have looked into getting him on the Contender Series earlier this year, but it is what it is. I'm going to go with him by KO. The next fight at featherweight is going to be Yves Landau taking on Walter Cogliandro at 145 pounds, which is a very interesting move for Yves Landau here. He spent a lot of his career at 155. In fact, he's actually spent his last few years fighting at 155. He fought Brazier, Wild, and Hughes all at 155, and now he's going to be moving down to 145 to meet Walter Cogliandro, the Italian here, fighting at home. And I'm going to be picking Landau to win this matchup here. It's going to be interesting to see if he can make the weight at 36 years old, or how he's even going to look on the scales, but I think that Yves Landau should win this one here. Walter Cogliandro, for the most part, he seems like a striker with a little bit of grappling, but he spent his whole fight against Jae-Hyuk Bang on the feet, and in that one there, Jae-Hyuk was just a lot faster than him, was just landing more volume on him, and Cogliandro was trying to counter punch, but he's just too slow. He really just was too slow that whole fight, and Jae-Hyuk Bang kind of maintained a good pace throughout the whole fight and won a 30-27 decision. Cogliandro seemed to have thought that he won the fight, which was somewhat interesting, but he went to a split decision with a 5-2 opponent as well, lost to Steve Almeida, who was 16-8, and Cage Warriors, which isn't too bad, but Yves Landau, you know, he's been in Bellator for a while, and he made his Bellator debut about 2 years ago, but he fought for Ryzen, and Bellator seem to be very good friends. They've got a joint card coming up later on in the year, and he beat Terry Brazier, 11-3 opponent, lost to Tim Wild, 13-4, and then beat Gavin Hughes, who was 10-2. I guess records are for GJs, but Yves Landu, in my opinion, on the feet should, at 36 years old, be the faster, more powerful striker. I'm not really too impressed with what I've seen from Walter. This guy recently has just been a decision machine, win or loss, and he just doesn't really seem to have the power to finish someone at 145. So I like Yves Landu to win this fight. I might go with him by KO here. Minus 200 as a favourite ain't too bad from what I've been seeing from this guy, but at the same time, at some point, Walter was 10-1. Which is interesting, because he didn't look like a 10-1 fighter against Jae-Hyuk Bang. But I'm going to go with Yves Landu. I'm not going to say that I'm confident in it, but I really do expect him to win this matchup here, and I think it should be a striking affair that Landu should just get the better of Cogliandro for 3 rounds, or a KO at some point in the fight. And now we move on to Kiara Pinko, and it's another fight which I'm going to be honest with you guys, it's a pretty tough one to get a read on. It's low-level women's strawweight MMA, which usually tends to be somewhat easier to predict compared to some of the other female weight classes, but I'm really struggling with this one here. Both of these ladies have somewhat similar styles, but I'd say that Pinko has more of a chance to get a finish on the ground, but that really is just because she's got a couple of submission victories and a ground and pound victory thrown in there as well against better competition than what Manuela Marceneiro has been fighting. And I'm just really confused in what Manuela Marceneiro has been doing with her career. So she lost her first ever fight as an amateur. She lost a decision, and then she went pro, and then she lost a pro fight, and then she went back to amateurs, which I'm surprised you can do that, actually. I find that interesting. So she fought a few fights as an amateur, and now she's gone back to fighting as a professional after she lost as a professional in 2017. So she's kind of been bouncing between being an amateur and a professional, and she's winning decisions over girls which are 2-1, 1-3, and 5-1, which I guess are pretty good wins to have on your record, especially that 5-1 win recently. And she's done it all, once again, recently. All of these wins have happened in 2022, which I do respect. I do respect the activity. But I'm going to be going with Kiara Pinko here. I think that she's just going to be slightly better of a grappler, and I think she's going to be able to win a decision that way. I definitely think fight goes the distance, but at minus 290 as a favourite, I think Pinko is a little bit too wide there. I think Manuela Marceneiro plus 230 is not too bad, but once again, I keep your money in your pocket, and I would not recommend putting money down on this fight here. But I do like Pinko to win a decision, if that means anything to you. Let's just move on to the next fight. And we're going to be moving on to the belt Goldie versus Alfie Davis, and I've got another Bellator underdog, and I'm not too sure how I feel about it because the belt Goldie is going to be moving back down to 155 pounds as an almost 36-year-old, and I'm picking the underdog. I'm picking a second Bellator underdog on the card, which is really scary. Picking underdogs in Bellator is definitely a risky thing to do, but I'm going to be going with Alfie Davis here. I feel like I don't have the worst read in the world on Alfie Davis. I've picked his fight somewhat correctly so far. I picked him to beat Tim Wilde, and that ended up being a draw. And then I did pick Alexander Shabalai to beat him as well, if that means anything. And then I didn't have a YouTube channel before then. But I like Alfie Davis in this matchup here. It is probably one of the more tough opponents that he's ever fought. I mean, Goldie is going to be moving down a weight class to 155, so it'll be interesting to see how he looks on the scales. But he last beat Lewis Long, who was a 19-6 opponent over in Bellator, and before that he was fighting on the regional scene. And in the UFC as well, you can see from the background that he did fight in the UFC, and he lost to Nazarov Haqparast about 4 years ago. So obviously since then he's made improvements, and he's gone on a nice little winning streak. Bellator have picked him up like they do with a lot of former UFC fighters. But I'm going to have to go with Alfie Davis in this one here. I know for the belt Goldie has probably fought the better levels of competition in his career, but realistically he is almost 36 years old, and I feel like Alfie Davis is going to be making the more rapid improvements, and he's the more natural 155 pound fighter as well at this point in both of their careers. So I'm going to be going with Alfie Davis to win a decision in this matchup here. Not a confident play. Personally, probably a fight which I reckon once again you keep your money in your pocket, and I think you just sit back and enjoy it. But I think it should be a pretty good fight for what it's worth, even though I do think it is going to go the distance. And now we've just got, honestly, a really weird fight. You've got Simon Biong taking on Drago Subco, and Drago Subco's 3-1. Simon Biong is 8-2, sorry. But the weird part about this fight is Drago Subco has not fought for 3 years, and even then his last win was over a guy with an 0-1 record. Before that, he fought this guy who we can only assume is debuting 7 years ago. And then another guy that doesn't have a Tapology page, who once again we can only assume was debuting 7 years ago. Like, I can't give you a read on what Drago Subco is going to bring to the table whatsoever, because this guy hasn't fought for 3 years. He's fought twice in about 7 years, and his one win on his record is over an 0-1 opponent, but he does have obviously some glory kickboxing experience, and I'm assuming that's probably what he's been filling these 3 years in, is doing some kickboxing. But I'm going to be going with Simon Biong here. He's the mixed martial arts fighter here. He's got good wins on his record. You know, he beat Luke Trainor, who's fighting earlier on in the card. I think he's going to win his fight. He lost to Christian Edwards, who was going on to be a pretty good prospect for Bellator, and before that he was beating experienced guys at Ryzen, sorry, not Eagle FC, Extreme FC over in South Africa, I believe, is where that promotion is based, in a losing record earlier on in his career. But Biong, 6'6", 74-inch reach as well, and does have power in the hands if he needs to use it. But I think he's going to look to use his grappling in this one here. I think he's going to look to grapple against Drago Subco, who hasn't fought MMA for 3 years. Yeah, it's a weird one. I'm going to pick Biong to win. I'm not too sure about a prop, but I really think that Biong should win this one here. Minus 400, honestly. I wouldn't mind putting him in a parlay, but I wouldn't make him like an anchor or a parlay or something that you're really going to rely on. But I think you should be able to prop up the odds for a parlay. But just what a weird fight. That it's an interesting one, that's for sure. If Drago Subco comes out and wins by knockout in the first round, he's going to embarrass me a lot. But I feel like with the proof and what the evidence that I've got in front of me, Biong fighting in Bellator for a little bit, even at Ryzen as well for one fight, and Subco not fighting MMA for 3 years, and then just fighting like 7 years ago, the evidence leads to Biong winning this fight, so I'm going to go with that. And now you've got Savodsgon Kamadov taking on Jose Maria Tomei, and the pick is Savodsgon, and I was hoping that he was going to be a little bit of a closer favourite here, but he's minus 800, and I believe that he's 25 years old. I'm not too sure, I'm not going to confirm anything there, but I'm pretty sure he's 25, and Jose Maria Tomei is almost 41. But what's so interesting about Jose Maria Tomei is you look at his record and he's 40 wins to 9 losses, and that is a padded record. He's actually, if you look into his record, he's actually Henry Cejudo's jiu-jitsu coach from back in the day, and he actually had a little bit of a UFC run himself, where he fought John Lineker and Dustin Ortiz. That's a tough run. He fought twice in the UFC and he lost twice by KO to two pretty top guys. But before that, man, this record is it's shady. It's super shady, you know. Like, he went 13-0 against who? And then he fought Leandro Higo, who was 2-0, who's actually now in the Bellator. Fought Juicy Famia, former UFC fighter now, in 2008, and lost to him when he was 14-1. Famia was 3-0. And then he just beat guys that, like, who are these guys, you know? And then he ended up going 33-3, signed to the UFC, probably because of Henry Cejudo. Lost a couple of times. Then continued fighting not too bad competition, really, but at this point he was 33, 36-5 sort of thing. Fought a couple of undefeated guys. Askarov actually put in there, and then he's just kind of sprinkling his record. What a weird career, though. What a weird career. He started out 33-3, and now he's 40-9, taking on a 25-year-old, potentially. A guy from Tajikistan. A lot of Tajikistan fans really get behind their fighters, and I think that Savodsgon Kamadov is going to win this fight here. Both of these guys are grapplers. Savodsgon brings a wrestling style, and he does have good ground and pound. He has been winning his fights recently by decision, but he fought a pretty tough 29-9 opponent recently. 7-1 up and coming prospect. 6-0 guy AMC Fight Night. 7-1 and 5-1. So a lot of decision wins there, but he does have ground and pounds if he needs to use it. And almost like the other Tajikistan fighter on Dana White's Contender Series, I wouldn't be surprised if just all of a sudden this guy brings out some ground and pound and wins by ground and pound TKO. But I feel like Savodsgon is just going to stay safe on the ground. But I know it's pretty tough ask, potentially, to ask from someone that is Henry Cejudo's Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu coach, but you got to consider the fact that this guy is almost 41 years old, and his record is super padded, man. I really don't know how I feel about him, but I think that Kamadov should win this one here. I think he's going to be the bigger fighter. Maria Tomei recently has been fighting at 125 in the past, and I think that Kamadov should be able to control his way to a decision win. But, as I said, I wouldn't be too surprised if you saw a Kamara ground and pound TKO. If he was minus 800, I wouldn't mind him, but I feel like maybe, once again, the odds are a little bit too wide to be confident, you know? I know he's 13-0, and he's actually 13-0 against pretty good competition, which is a rarity. But Jose Maria Tomei, maybe this guy has something off his back to throw up a submission. But I'm going to go Kamara by decision. I think he's going to stay relatively safe and land ground and pound. Just to win a decision, really. Now we've got Davy Gallen taking on Daniel Skitizzi, and if you don't know, now you know. Davy Gallen retired Ross Pearson with a rolling thunder kick. If you haven't seen it, I recommend you watch it. He knocked out Ross Pearson, former UFC fighter, former The Ultimate Fighter contestant as well, with a rolling thunder kick brutally in the third round. Ross Pearson was out cold after that fight. It was actually very brutal. And then he returned. He took a couple of years off, and then he returned to meet Kane Musa, which is a well-aging win. Kane Musa recently got a win as an underdog, which I predicted in a recent Bellator card. Fought Charlie Leary, a veteran of the sport. Benjamin Brander, 13-8 fighter, which he was probably expected to win. But yeah, that's one I want you to check out. If you don't know what a rolling thunder kick is, just watch this fight and you'll find out. Towards the end of the fight, there's about a minute left, and Davy Gallen just throws out the most random rolling thunder kick, and Ross Pearson gets knocked out cold from it. It's actually kind of insane. But Daniel Skitizzi, he's a pretty good fighter, but I don't think he's going to have the tools to beat Davy Gallen. I'm actually pretty confident in Davy Gallen, and I like the price tag that you're getting at a minus 160 to win this fight. I don't think it's too bad. I know Davy Gallen's an older guy, and Skitizzi is the younger, more prospect guy, I guess you could say. Maybe that Bellator is trying to look at, especially in Italy as well as home crowd. But I'm going to be going with Gallen. I think Gallen's got the tools to beat Skitizzi. He's a very well-rounded fighter, is Gallen. Skitizzi, in my opinion, he's taller, but he's also a lot slimmer. I think that Gallen should be able to get the fight to the ground if he wants to. He got a ground and pound TKO against Benjamin Brander. I think maybe he could do something similar to Skitizzi in this one here. Skitizzi recently lost to Tokov, 5-1 fighter, which I don't mind too much. He beat Gavin Hughes, who was 10-1 at the time as well. But yeah, I'm going to be going with Gallen. I'm actually really confident in him getting this one done. I'm not too sure about a prop. Maybe he could get a KO at some point, or he could get a decision. Maybe he could throw out the rolling thunder with 1 minute left in the fight and get the most crazy highlight reel KO ever. But I think that Davy Gallen's going to win. I'm going to say I'm more confident in a decision than a TKO. But yeah, I'm pretty confident that Gallen should win, especially at these odds. And now we've got Justin Gonzalez fighting Andrew Fisher, and in my opinion, this is just a fight that Justin Gonzalez should win. It's going to be taking place at 145 pounds, which is Justin Gonzalez's more mature weight class. Obviously, it is for Fisher as well. But Gonzalez is the younger guy. He's kind of a prospect as well. He fought on Dana White's Contender Series 3 years ago, but couldn't finish Zach Zane, which I think was a big enough red flag for them not to sign Justin. He went on to win over an 8-0 guy, LFA, and that's when Bellator picked him up and he won a very close competitive fight with Taiwan Claxton. And then they were like, you know what, since you won a split decision over Taiwan Claxton, we're going to give you Aaron Pico. And Aaron Pico does what Aaron Pico does. And then he fights Kamara III to a split decision. This guy's fighting to really close decisions in Bellator, apart from the Aaron Pico fight, where maybe Andrew Fisher could make something happen. But Andrew Fisher, at the end of the day, is the 37-year-old fighter. He's a veteran. He's on a good win streak right now. He fought in Bellator recently against a 12-6 opponent. Had an eye poke against Robert Whitefoot, and he has been beating veterans outside of Bellator. But at the end of the day, Justin Gonzalez, in my opinion, is the more up-and-coming guy. He knows how to win close fights, obviously, as shown by his 2 wins in Bellator, which are split decisions, which isn't the best look. But a good win over Kamara III, a guy that was released from the UFC, and a guy that has been on the receiving end of some really weird decisions. I picked Kamara III to beat Justin Gonzalez in that one, but it was a pretty competitive fight. It is what it is. I think Gonzalez should win this one over Fisher. I'm going to pick him by decision. If you can't finish Zach Zane, Zach Zane just travels the world getting finished by anyone everywhere. Like, Zach Zane has fought, you name a promotion, Zach Zane's fought in it. Dana White's Contender Series. Zach Zane's fought in Bellator, Eagle FC. I'm pretty sure he's fought in Ryzen. And I know he's just fought everywhere. You name it, Zach Zane's fought there, and he's probably been finished there. Gonzalez couldn't finish him, so yeah, I don't think he's going to be able to finish Andrew Fisher. It could age badly, but based on the evidence, I don't think Gonzalez gets a finish. Going to pick him to win by decision in this fight here. And now we've got Saul Rogers taking on Tim Wilde, pretty high up on the main card here. I'm going to be picking Saul Rogers, but I'm not the biggest fan of the price tag. Minus 400 I feel like is a little bit taxed. But at the end of the day, if Saul Rogers can get this fight to the ground, it should be an easy night for him. I think that he's going to be able to win by submission or decision if he can do that. But if Tim Wilde can keep the fight on the feet, I think it could get very interesting, as I do think that Wilde may be the better striker in this matchup. But I think it definitely does just come down to, can Saul Rogers get the fight to the ground? In my opinion, he can. With Saul Rogers, though, he's got to be a little bit careful. He has been submitted in the past. He's been submitted a couple of times. He got submitted in Bellator by Mads Brownell, and he has been submitted by a guillotine choke earlier on in his career as he was entering on a takedown. So maybe he's got to look out for that from Wilde, but in my opinion, I think that Rogers should be pretty safe if he gets it to the mat. He beat Yordri Karahanyan recently, and he fought a Mads Brownell, who's, as I said, he got a submission, and Mads Brownell's a very good fighter, has gone on a good run. Arbi Mesdedov, 13-3 fighter at the time. Daniel Whiteshell, very experienced veteran. 3 years ago, he was a little bit younger than he is now. And Aiden Lee, 7-3, a run in Bellator. Tim Wilde, though, he's been looking pretty good. He lost to Brett Primus, who I believe has gone on to do good things. Charlie Leary is beaten, and so is Yves Landu. But, yeah, coming off that draw to Alfie Davis, who's earlier on in the card as well. But I'm going to be going with Saul Rogers. I think he gets the fight to the mat, and I'm pretty confident he wins either by decision or submission. I think that Rogers is just that good on the ground, especially compared to Wilde. So I'm going to be going with Rogers to use his grappling to win a decision. I'm going to go with decision, but I wouldn't be too surprised if we saw a submission at some point in this fight. And in your co-main event, you got Fabian Edwards taking on Charlie Ward. Fabian is actually the younger brother of current UFC champion Leon Edwards. And me and JT, we picked Leon Edwards to beat. We picked Leon Edwards to beat Kamara Usman, and we're feeling pretty good about that prediction. And I'm going to be picking Fabian Edwards to win his fight against Charlie Ward. And I think he's going to be able to get a knockout on this one here. He's going to be the longer fighter. He's going to be the taller fighter. And Charlie Ward is almost 42 years old at the end of the day, really. Charlie Ward's a bit of a brawler, and he has been running through the guys that he's been given. But he's been given guys that he should be beating. He's been fighting against Alan Carlos with 13-9, Andy Manzolo, who was a veteran, and Kyle Kurtz, who knocked out, who was 10-7 at the time. I feel like Charlie Ward's gone on a pretty good win streak, but I think it's going to get snapped right now by Fabian Edwards, who... Poor Lyoto Machida. He knocked out Lyoto Machida in a fight which I think that they were trying to get Fabian Edwards back on a winning streak, and maybe at the same time maybe give Lyoto Machida a fight which maybe he could win, but poor Lyoto Machida. Fabian Edwards knocked him out, but before that he lost to Austin Vanderford, who ended up getting a title shot at Bellator, and he lost a very close split decision fighter to Costello Van Stenise, who was fighting earlier on in this card, which is interesting, which always seems to happen in Bellator. But anyway, he beat Mike Shipman, who's 13-2, and Jonathan Basoku was 7-4-1. I feel like when Fabian Edwards gets an opportunity like this, he's going to be able to make the most of it. He's a massive favourite over Charlie Ward. Maybe the odds are a little bit too wide, as Charlie Ward could make it interesting, but at the end of the day, Fabian Edwards is the more technical striker. He's a lot faster than Ward, especially at Ward being almost 42 years old. And I just think he's going to keep the fight on the feet, and I think he's going to be able to use his speed, and I think he's going to knock Charlie Ward out at some point in this fight. I think maybe it goes over the first round, potentially, and Edwards' strikes kind of start to add up, and then he gets like some sort of like TKO up against the cage over Charlie Ward, who can't really defend himself anymore. So that's kind of the pick, picking Edwards by KO. I think he gets it done at some point in the fight, and it should be pretty exciting. Now, this main event is, it's pretty wild. You've got Adam Piccolotti taking on Manso Barnaoui, and Manso Barnaoui is headlining a Bellator card in Italy, and he hasn't fought for 3.5 years, and he's never fought in Bellator before either. That's kind of crazy, you know, like, Barnaoui kind of won $1 million in a Road FC tournament, which took place over 2 years. He ended up beating Asal Kwan in the finals and won $1 million doing that, which is kind of awesome. I believe it's like a 16-man tournament, and it took place over 2 years at Road FC, and he won $1 million for it. Pretty cool. Adam Piccolotti, though, is definitely not someone to take lightly. He's been losing very close decisions to elite fighters such as Benson Henderson and Sydney Outlaw, both guys that are pretty high up in the division right now. And in between that, he has been beating guys that he should be beating, you know what I mean? But every time I feel like Adam Piccolotti's been getting a step up in competition, he's been making it competitive, but losing very close decision. And Mansour Barnaoui he's an elite guy. He's an elite prospect. When Actually, honestly though, so can someone maybe let me know why he's taken 3 years off? Because I actually did a little bit of research on this, and I tried to find it, and I genuinely couldn't. But yeah, Mansour Barnaoui, this guy's an elite prospect. This is a guy that maybe the UFC really should have looked at signing when they were making their UFC card on Paris. Like, this guy's a very elite prospect. He's been talked about for a long time, but now that he hasn't fought for 3 years, 3.5 years, he's kind of faded off the face of the planet. But maybe if he can get a massive win over Adam Piccolotti, this will skyrocket him into the rankings in Bellator, in my opinion, and make him a pretty big name for Bellator in France. And maybe if Bellator returns back to France, they could have Barnaoui being a co-headliner or even in the headliner at that fight. I'm picking Mansour Barnaoui. Minus 135 is actually a very good price tag on him, but I genuinely believe that is because he hasn't fought for 3 years and 5 months. That's the big red flag in this matchup. I feel like you're not going to get Barnaoui against someone like Piccolotti at this price if Barnaoui goes out and looks really good like I am expecting him to. But I always have red flags and I always have reservations about picking people that have taken so much time off. He hasn't fought for 3.5 years, which I think is very important. I don't really know what he's been doing in that time. Like, he hasn't even fought in between. I thought maybe he would take a year off after winning the tournament, and then he would come back, but he never has. I don't really understand what his plans were with that, but maybe he just won the $1 million and thought, you know what, like, this is me sold. But maybe Bellator threw him a pretty good contract, and he's all of a sudden in the main event, in a 5-round main event, after 3.5 years off. I think Barnaoui wins, and I think Barnaoui wins by finish. I think he's going to hurt Piccolotti and then maybe get a submission like he has done in the past. He's got a lot of submission wins, but most of these actually do come from him hurting his opponent first, and he does get KOs as well himself. As I said, this guy's a very legitimate opponent. Like, his one of his losses to Mateusz Gamrot, who is at the top of the UFC lightweight division right now. A guy that was 29-4 at the time, Islam Makhachev as well, and that was a war between the two. That was actually a very good fight. And Kevin Lee, when Kevin Lee was 1-0, he fought Mansour Barnaoui, who was 7-0, which is very interesting. But I guess it happened, man. But yeah, I'm going to be picking Barnaoui here. I think he should get the win. I think if he comes out and looks really good, you're not going to get Barnaoui at the same price tag. I don't mind him at minus 135. You could get plus money on him. Maybe if you go inside the distance, or even you parlay him with someone that you're really confident in winning. I don't really want to say, but maybe you could throw Kamara in with a parlay with him, or you could just do him and Stephen Hill, or maybe just him and Davy Gallen or something like that to get some plus money. I think that we should be seeing a pretty good fight. I think it's going to be competitive. But I think Barnaoui at some point is going to land a big shot and get Piccolotti hurt and get a submission win here. So I think that Bellator knows what they're doing in this matchup here. I don't think Piccolotti has got a finish in a very long time. He hasn't. So he got a submission over Jake Smith 3 years ago. Yeah, so I think Barnaoui is going to be pretty safe on the feet with Piccolotti. And I think he's going to hurt him at some point and then eventually work for a submission. So give me... Or do that, or he's going to get a KO. So I'm going to be going with Barnaoui just by finish. Hopefully you guys enjoyed those Bellator 287 predictions. Hopefully maybe I can be on the show to do some more Bellator predictions, and PFL is coming up as well. The PFL Grand Finals, which is on a pay-per-view, which is somewhat interesting, but it's coming up as well. Pretty big card, and I will be predicting that on the We Want Picks channel as well. So let me know what you think about my picks. Let me know if you disagree or if you agree. I know I've thrown in a couple of risky underdogs on this card, but sometimes you just got to do it with Bellator, because Bellator really is a lot of the time really wide odds that maybe you have to decide whether or not you want to pay that tax. And if you don't want to pay that tax, then maybe look at the underdog, and maybe you're going to find a really good underdog in there. And I feel like I have found a couple of good underdogs in this one here. I'm not too confident in Alfie Davis, but I think the best underdog on the card, in my opinion, is Camille Onyx. I really do genuinely believe in this guy's striking. I think he might be able to get a KO if the fight stays on the feet, so I like him. Apart from that, I'm pretty sure I'm picking all the favourites, but it is what it is. This is just kind of what happens in Bellator, unfortunately. So yeah, let me know what you think in the comments below, and let me know if you enjoyed the show. I don't know if We Want Picks has done Bellator in the past, but we're definitely planning on doing Bellator in the future, and I'm going to be making Bellator videos and PFL prediction videos for